that you and I don't trade access to. So I think we have to search those out. Because when you're a developer, and you want to think the next thought, most of us have what everybody in this room has written. Most of us have written at least small Apex classes, and we've written the test routine that we put it into. So the thirst for the knowledge now is not how you write an Apex class. Now the thirst of the knowledge is like, how do you build a big system? Like, how do you build a system that is really, really, really safe? Those of us who work with finance sites. Okay, I'll talk to you more. I'm sorry, I don't really think. So first, for that next level of knowledge, it's there. And there's a small group of people, Dallas, San Francisco, and others, where they have those conversations. The idea of, well, Apex is an object-oriented concept, it's an object-oriented language. This thing is object-oriented, the idea of cellular code. Is it part of the future? What are its advantages? Like we're writing procedural code and completely abandon this idea of inheritance. These are conversations that a good architect. And in my opinion, a good architect comes from being a good developer. Like Salesforce doesn't totally agree with that. They say you can be a great architect without having any knowledge of code. But I think it's the other way around. Now, that's a bias because I'm an old man. I have an old man's bias, but also because my background from computer science. I think of architecture. I really do believe that as we're thinking about flows, first of all, flows give us this freedom from thinking about the low-level stuff, variables, and how they interact and how the inheritance. We can get away from the glitchiness of it. But I think that as an architect, as a person in charge with building a scalable system, if you're not thinking about, well, what is the sub-architecture? How are my flows being fired? And can I put in some rules of the corporate rules that say you can't write a flow? I know Salesforce lets you write a flow because bloody hell, you're a sysadmin, right? But please don't until you have read our architecture document and you understand how to connect your flow to the rest of the flow that we built, this massive 10,000 node flow that we built. Now you just randomly come along and say, boss, I know how to do this thing with flows, let me build it. And off you go. And now suddenly you completely ignored the idea that my flow should be triggered by a traffic flow. These types of things corporations are having a lot of difficulty happening. Business unit cares about what? Hey, I need
time to market.
And gee, I didn't have to hire IT to do this. The junior guy who learned flows last week, he did it for me. And then something else breaks. So yeah, we are in in kind of a difficult time right now. Corporations need to come back and they need to realize that season guys that you live some horror stories, that will let you kind of have some say in how the structure ought to work. But good luck, because last week somebody learned flow with his boss. the boss said, hey, yeah, if you know how to build it, go ahead and build it, and it doesn't matter for us. So yeah, it's and then when you go to reinforce this, you're going to say, hey, flows are easy, everybody can do it. You don't need the so there is that dissonance between the two.
Yeah.
Well, I talked too much, sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm sitting at the feet of the master, and you're describing something very elegantly that I am very snobby about. I think anybody can be a developer, and the term architect, I use that as a mantle of respect. Anybody can bowl, but the people who build bowling alleys, the lanes between them, and understand that you can't have bowling without lanes. Anybody knows how to bowl, but if you don't put lanes and separators and gutters in between it, you've got dodgeball. And dodgeball is not great with the bowling ball. Architects build bowling alleys, and they can sometimes bowl. They bowl because they bowled, and because they've accidentally gotten hit by a bowling ball. They know the importance of lanes and gutters and rules. And to me, that's an architect. And you don't wear that architect mantle until you've had to kick yourself in your own shin going, oh, I can build this tomorrow, but it would be bad for the long term. This would hit somebody. It'd be really fun to do bowling, full contact bowling. No, that would be murder for insurance. And until you've stopped your own progress and made yourself go down slow and taken one for the team, that's when you become an architect.
A few years back, Parker has a major effort underway, and I know Salesforce of allocating time, energy, and money actually to refactoring code that you run. So there's actually a cycle associated. And I'm curious to find out, do you guys in your companies, are you given the permission to allocate cycles for refactoring code? No business value delivered, but great technical debt eliminated during those cycles. Who works for big companies? Right? Do they allow you to allocate cycles to technical debt relief?
So we have those.
Yeah.
They are just they have too much work. Yeah, so and they just write things out, they get things done, and they leave away.
And they leave and they don't care about the
And Arun,
about
sorry, go ahead.
if your company will have cycles dedicated to that. This is good. I think in the mid-sized companies, I don't think it happens at all.
On the very rare occasion, some of the smaller companies are work with also they do that. I think it's important to know.
Really, everybody agrees, and in the board everybody says, "Oh, it's a good thing," but when the rubber meets the road, it's not happening.
Yeah, as a business analyst hat, one of the things that I try to do in any of the projects is have an archive of known technical debt. So when we touch that entity or touch that code, part of that project is to incorporate fixing at least some segment of the technical debt while within that code anyway.
It's admirable.
To figure out reducing.
I think it's admirable that companies are thinking about it. And you have to think about it before you do it, right? But I think the other challenge that we have is technologists, software engineers, techies, developers with admins don't like to admit that their code isn't perfect. At midnight when they're lying awake, they say, I need to go back and correct this. We do that. We all do. We're unhappy. We're unhappy that we wrote the code the way we did. But we tend to not admit it to anybody else. And that's also a problem. Code reviews, things like that. the end of the day, it's somebody inside has to have some manager, say, to blow these cycles on technical debt. Because there's always somebody, if some manager say, what, you mean you didn't do it right the first time? Right? That is that counter argument. Wait a minute, I thought you had a really great team. You didn't do it right the first time. Why do you need more time and money to fix what you should have done incorrectly? See, that argument then tends to drive kind of a blanket over the conversation of, hey, we have this stuff, it works. It's going to break next year or the year after that, or it won't scale. Salesforce hasn't backed away from the argument. If you listen to their pitch to large corporations, it's in there that in your process. Right? Here's what you do. Even in org health checks, if you run one of their accelerators, there's an accelerator that you can request from Salesforce.
Depends on your licensing, your support licensing.
Depends on how big, right? It's essentially a freebie for really large clients. And I religiously have my clients do it like December or January. And they come out and they run all these against your organization. Essentially what I think is a help. But then the last 3 or 4 slides, I think it's second to last or third to last slide, they actually sit down in front of and leaders and say, and here's this component of technical. Nothing wrong with your book, other than what you found in the first. You need to think about giving these guys a little statement.
Yeah, you've got to, I always say you have to build it around that core. You need to know what pace you're going to keep and build a technical debt team that has the fit to where you don't end up managing away innovation. If you kill time to market because, okay, it has to be perfect. All right, we have to have 110% code coverage or test class coverage. And you have to fill out all these forms and you have to make sure that you're doing it in flows and not in this. And you can wipe out your ability to go to market when you have somebody new with an idea. And it's always that balancing act and where you handle that technical debt. And I want to hop in on, I've already started the recording. Arun is here. He's our speaker for tonight. So, hey, Arun, we just started this Lyceum style conversation that I'm enjoying the format, but we're kind of mid.
Can you give Sarah 5 minutes?
I absolutely can. That was my next slide. Yeah, that was next step. So yeah, before we hop in and join Arun to the conversation, Sarah, you have some announcements about our user group and a new publication that is available.
So I did bring a couple of copies for fall to give away. But every year we host a charity stand-up weekend, and we would love for each and every one of you to come out and participate. It will be March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd this year. And we have a book signing on Friday night on March 1st. It'll feature none other than Paul, myself,
and Joyce is here. Joyce of Manila.
And then we'll also have Jody Harbuck and Rakesh Gupta as well. And Don Robbins will be there with Plural Psych. So that'll be a fun thing that happens on Friday night. It's for Center for Children and Families, which is the UT Dallas charity. So the stand-up will be posted on the UT Dallas campus. It'll run all weekend. If you go to t.digital/CCF, you can sign up to volunteer. Last year we had 418 volunteers, and this year I'm limiting it to 250. So that way we can actually make sure that everything has to work. So if you want to participate, I strongly encourage you to go sign up. We are about 75% full with signups right now. And we've got 40 days left to go. That's very exciting. And we will have some special Salesforce guests that will be joining us this year. We're not announcing those yet, so you'll have to come to the stand up for that. But we would love to have you there. Food will be provided for all trade meals on Saturday and Sunday, and Friday we will have dinner as well. There will also be a raffle where you can win some fun Salesforce swag too.
Good deal. And while we're plugging, I am going to go ahead and I bored everybody with the details of my book. Anybody who really knows Salesforce probably doesn't need my book, but I am hosting a local community conference, a We Dreamin' conference here in Dallas in April of this year. It is going to be co-hosted with some other cloud technology conferences in the same building. We are still hoping to have everybody. If you buy a ticket to the Salesforce conference, you can go to the AWS class. If you want to, you can go sit in on a Kafka discussion held by multiple panelists from across the industry. So we're trying to get that out. Those tickets are on sale at wedreamin.org. So again, that's coming up. That's a big announcement. So, and it's ours. So this is our community, our developer community that I'm trying to kind of build the same kind of forum we have here. Just do it in one big shot and let you take the day off of work instead of having to come here at your nights. So
What's the date?
Year 24.
Yeah, there's sales on tickets right now. And if you can't find a sale code, hit me up. I can figure it out. If it's your company paying for it, who cares?
Or remind us of the dates.
What's that?
Remind us of the dates.
April 9th, 10th, and 11th. So the main sessions are 10th and 11th. April 9th is for workshops. There's a member of the architect evangelist team that is hopefully going to be doing an architect workshop there. So we're still discussing that. So that's coming. Salesforce user group.
My instructor just told me that they have a UX.
No, wrong class.
Yeah, I guess it's not in this room. So sorry. Okay, so Arun, sorry, we've just gotten deep into our discussion already. Anybody else have any other announcements that we need to make before that? Oh, now that everybody's here, next month, we are in theory have a room reserved at the tower, the Salesforce Tower downtown. So we'll be having the user group meeting there. We'll be partnering with the Snowflake user group and hopefully talking about Salesforce, Snowflake, and Data Cloud, formerly known as Genie. So that should be an interesting one. Again, logistics may be a mess. I've never done one of these before. You guys know what I know, which is the address of the building. So I'll start hopefully getting some more details and we'll see who our guides and Sherpas will be when we get down there. But I hope everybody can make it. Should be interesting. No telling who could show up at the meeting there. So we'll see. Hey, Arun, are you there? Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, Paul. Are you able to hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. I'm going to go try and turn it up. We may have to go a little back and forth. The volume here is not great. And when I get the volume for this microphone, it's not great. And then, so let me mute that. I'm going to go. Let's see, how should we do this? I forgot my fancy wireless microphones. They're all charging. So I'm struggling with the acoustics logistics.
Yeah, no worries.
We'll just do that. Let me just go turn it up and we'll deal with a little bit of that when we start to talk.
Okay.
Okay,
Do you guys get echo?
Okay. Let's see. Hopefully I'm talking through this mic. Can you hear me now, Arun?
I can hear you okay. Yep.
Okay. All right. So we'll have to get creative whenever anybody has any questions. So I think we're good here. They can hear you. You can hear me. And that's most of the story.
Can you grant me access to share screen, or do you would you like to share the screen?
I can hear you, but I can't understand you.
Oh, hold on. No.
Oh, yeah.
Can
Yeah. I
I-
made you co-host. You should be able to share your screen.
It's saying disabled participant screen sharing.
Maybe it's because I accidentally made Nathan a co-host also. All right.
I can share something, but I will not.
Let's see.
I'm trying to allow sharing, but I don't see it.
Okay, I keep trying to, I don't know what, I keep clicking the button that says make co-host. And it doesn't seem to be doing.
Or can you click on my name and make me a presenter? Is there an option like that?
Yeah, no, it's co-host or host. I can make you host, but then I lose it. And you'll have to give it back to me. So, or let's try that.
Okay.
Oh, wait, there it is. Hold on. It's challenging. Sorry. Let me, one more try. I say
no
make
worries.
co-host and it pops up a message box that says, do you want to make him co-host? Yeah, that's why I clicked it. And it's on a different monitor. Okay, you should be co-host now.
Okay. Yeah, I can see the.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. All good. So let me bring up my presentation. Okay. I hope you can see my screen.
Can see it? Good.
Perfect.
So please introduce yourself. I didn't give give people a very good intro on you, so apologize for that. I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, no worries, Paul. First of all, thanks for having me here. Thanks to you and Moise. My name is Arun Balasubramanian. So I'm a Salesforce architect. I work for Salesforce. I work on the professional services org. So help implement and architect solutions for customers on the financial services sector. And I've been in the ecosystem, Salesforce ecosystem, for like 16 years now. Started in 2008, before Visualforce was even a thing. And I worked a bit with Java before I got onto the Salesforce ecosystem. So I'm really happy to be part of this session today. I was telling Paul, I actually was in Dallas for Christmas. I wish we could have coordinated better so that I can be in person today. Maybe probably I'll try in the future, I'll try to visit in person. Wait. So, I mean, like a lot of good overview from Moise about flows, and I know you might have heard a lot about flows from Paul. So I was not aware about the mix of this group. So I kind of thought we'll give a little bit of flow overview for people who are new to the Salesforce ecosystem or maybe new to flows, and really talk about some of the challenges that we would encounter with flows as we adopt it in medium or even large scale implementations, and how can we prevent those challenges or work around those. And this is my favorite part of the last. I would like to propose, I recommend most of my customers to kind of use a decision guide, on when to flow or not flow, right? Based on your organization's requirements. So, and then obviously, feel free to, hit me with any questions during the presentation, or we can have one at the end of the presentation as well.
Okay. So Arun, I did a quick poll before we started. We've all been visiting for about an hour now, and I think the median is intermediate flow builders. So we don't have a whole lot of new to flow and don't know anything about flows. We've got a lot of people that know enough to be dangerous and are starting to find needs for managing lots of flows. So we've been talking about the need to move to event-driven architecture, and some of the the one flow per object type thing and stuff like that. So we've built I say 2 flows per object, but if you have a system, it's a good system. Build a system, build a structure that fits your need and where you need to be managed, manage yourself. But if you're doing anything more than intros, then you probably need to build in some kind of a management or orchestration system around flows. So we've had that conversation. So that's kind of an update on the group. So I'll turn back to you, sir.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. So I'll just speed through this couple of slides. I mean, I like to, I mean, I don't know if everyone is familiar with how Flow has evolved. So it could be a quick refresher, right? So like I said, I started in 2008, even before, way before I started, we had, I think Salesforce had workflow rules, and they still have, just that you can't create new workflow rules. But that was the only way for us to automate back in those days. And Apex was very naive, like, there were a lot of limitations with how you can write Apex code. So workflow rules was our go-to business process automation tool. And come 2012, around that time, Visual Workflow got introduced into the ecosystem. So we had something called Cloud Flow Designer. It's a Adobe Flash-based flow designer on the Salesforce interface, classic interface. And it had its unique runtime that was not performing so great, in complex organizations, but it still did the job, right? Like something like alternative to writing, at the time we had something called Visual Force Page, that our UI code. Alternative to that was Visual Workflow, where you can build some simple forms and host on the platform. And 2015, Salesforce introduced Process Builders, which was kind of a enhanced version of workflow rules at that point. And it can do pretty much everything a workflow rule can do, minus like send outbound messages to external systems for integration. So, and around this time came in Lightning Experience, right? So it changed the entire dynamics on the Salesforce ecosystem. So everyone started moving from what we call a classic Salesforce UI, migrate to the Lightning Experience, which is kind of with a modern web experience platform. And there, came the evolution of the Flow Builder. So Flow Builder, somewhere in 2018, 2019, officially replaced what we used to call as Visual Workflow. It had a much better, builder embedded in the platform. Non-Flash runtime, so we do not need to have Flash, our browser supporting Flash. All those recommends were gone. And as you know, that's it. Like, it opened the floodgates for innovation. We have a very an amazing product team within Salesforce that is fully invested on flows. And like come 2021, as you might have heard, we announced the retirement of our legacy automation tools like workflow rules and process builders, and kind of said that the future direction is flows, right? Future direction for automation is flows, along with Apex triggers as needed. And flows, it keeps evolving, right? I mean, 2023, Sprint flows got a lot of big boost with enhancements like data tables that you can use drag and drop. You can use reactivity to provide a better user experience, and so on. And 2024 spring release also has some exciting cool things coming up, but the evolution continues, right? So this is like the journey from where Salesforce started with where we are right now with automation, as well as user experience using flows. I'm quickly going, I mean, again, knowing the audience from Paul, looks like you guys should be very familiar with this. These are the core flow types. I mean, not going to go through each of those, as you all know. Screen flows is for the UI, and then record trigger flows is for all the automation that happens when a record is created or edited. And then you have all this supporting flows, for platform events, schedule triggers, and auto launch and whatnot, right? And then you may not even realize how many template driven flows were introduced into the ecosystem, release over release, right? Like for appointment setting, we have a bunch of templates available. For field services, we have a different set of templates available. So you can pick and choose which type of flow you want to create based on your use case, right? And probably you guys already have gone through this several times. So I'll cut to the chase. Any questions on the overview, or or can I go ahead with the pitfalls?
Well, I think we're good. Sorry, I'm coming up so I can speak to the microphone. It's easier to hear out there, but I have to talk up here. So that's cool. Any questions so far from anybody? I didn't know Flash was a part of it all the way until 2019. I was a Flash developer back when that language died. I still blame Apple, so I am not an Apple fan because I was a Flash developer. So okay, yeah, I think we're all on board, Arun.
Yes.
I have one question.
Okay.
So Paul, I think you already discussed about that before Arun has started the presentation, but there was some best practices on how many flows we can implement per object, right? Is there any recommendation for doing that, or basically in the org that what we have done is we try to have before triggers, after triggers in like for each object. That's the pattern that we followed. But are there any other best practices on how many flows that we can implement per object?
Paul, if you're okay, we would touch base on this in one of the pitfalls, or if you want to, it's going to come up very shortly. If you're okay to hold on to this.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Okay, no, that's a great question. So that's a practical challenge. Thanks for bringing it up, Satya. But yeah, we're going to address that.
Yeah, I think those patterns are still being developed. So it's just now becoming a problem that we have to talk about. So when to do, where to put it in the order of operation, where to do it. If I want to do everything in flows, I don't want to wait for the order of operations to get down to the flow on an after save. You've got to do other things. So I don't think there's a good white paper on how to make it do what. Yet I started to try, and I wanted to write one around platform events being the central orchestrator and everything taking their cue from events. But I think we've still got a long ways to go before people settle on that. But I haven't seen any guidance from Salesforce, particularly about how to make those mesh.
Yeah, there is one approach I would like to talk. Again, I'll give it a high level at the end. But I'm with you. Like most customers are still trying to figure out how to put them all together. And we'll also talk about the order of execution as well. So speaking of the pitfalls, again, nothing to scare people away from flows or whatever, right? Flows is the future, right? It's just that like something like I think our audience, everyone need to be aware of and keep ourselves up to date as we start to adopt flows from small to large organizations, right? Salesforce on the help and training article, I put the link here and I think we will distribute the deck. It has some very basic best practices that we have to follow, like you don't want to hard code anything on the flows and stuff like that, right? And plan before you design and whatnot. Outside of those, I was talking to Paul, like, what we thought will be perfect for this group is go into some of the complex challenges, issues that we run into, and how we can, creatively work on those when we try to adopt flows. First and foremost, right, I think we had this kind of error, for a while, where you cannot execute more than 2,000 elements, in a transaction, right? So that limit got removed in one of the recent releases, I think like almost a year back. So, but unless you upgrade the flows to version 57 and above, so that was a release in which this limit was removed, you will not be able to leverage that, upgrade to the platform. So in a nutshell, we ought to make sure like all our flows are, kept up to date with the versions that Salesforce releases. As you know, every release is going to come up with a new version number. And like unlike Apex, where the compiler, say Apex is backward compatible, but at the same time, like unless you're using a new, Apex methods or classes, you don't have to really depend on the version upgrade, right? But with Flow, since the runtime is controlled by the Salesforce platform, some of those platform enhancements go hand in hand with the version upgrades. So make sure you have a practice in place in your organization to keep your Flow versions up to date, to take advantage of some of this platform enhancements that we are making recently. And one of the common mistakes that we see, like a lot of new Flow developers or Flow builders or admins that are into the flows, are not considering is to put fault parts to handle errors, right? Almost think as like a try catch or exception handling for code, right? And like again, like we have a lot of different types of flows here. So I try to bundle like the first pitfall we talked about applies to all flows, all types of flows. Screen flows, record triggered flows, auto launch flows, you name it, right? The screen element, the number of elements limit applied globally. So, but this second pitfall is about like, for screen flows, for example, if you're running out an error when doing a get records or making an Apex action, and you need to have a fault, path to handle the error and show the error in a gracious manner to the user in the screen flow, right? But if your flow is a auto launch flow or a record triggered flow, which runs behind the scene, then you probably want to log that error somewhere, so that your admins can later troubleshoot and figure out what went wrong. Some companies also use email alerts, like when they run to a exception in the flow, they try to send email alerts to email alerts to the admins. But the best practice would be like find a logging framework similar to what you maybe have using for Apex if you're already using one. Even otherwise, like you can come up with a simple logging approach that can be scalable for your flow implementations.
I think so. Number two, your bullet number two, I think leads to my favorite pattern. And see, if you consider flow a development language, treat flow like a development language and follow all the standard patterns that you follow for Apex. Same logging strategy, same management strategy, same organization strategy. Treat it as a full-fledged member and make sure that your flow developers have the same pattern instruction as your Apex developers so that you're aligning those work systems with each other. So I think that's a great bullet point is if you build those up, follow them regardless of which language you're writing it in.
Yep. Yep, I totally agree. And along the same lines, so with flows, you have multiple you have multiple places where you will write, you can query records, right? You can use get records, or if you're putting a schedule flow, you'll probably put the filters at the start method, right? But regardless, make sure you don't run schedule flows without query filters, right? Because like just because it's declarative, we have to just still make sure like the get records behind the scene runs a query and it performs very well, when deployed in production. So like how if you write a Apex code, you write SOQL to query from the platform. So you would probably use query plan tool that Salesforce provides, and there's a link to that here to analyze your SOQL performance, right? You can extend the same to see how your flow performs while querying for records, using get records or using the query start method in the flows. So all you have to do is set up debug logs and run your flows, and you may be able to see how well the flow is actually running behind the scene. Okay, this is the interesting one, and it may take a little bit of time. I think it could be time well spent here. The maximum number of scheduled flows. Just a very quick overview. I don't know how many really got a chance to implement those. Schedule trigger flows are like an alternative to Apex schedule jobs. Like you want to schedule a flow to run in a particular time, or maybe it could be recurring flows at a given time in a day, and those have governor limits, right? Just like anything else on the platform. So the typical limit is for 24 hours, your schedule trigger flow can execute like 2050 250K records, or they can query like the number of records, number of user licenses in your org multiplied by 200, whichever number is greater, right? So that's a limit that's applied to the number of records that can be queried via scheduled trigger flows. So one interview is created for each record that's retrieved by that query in the scheduled trigger flow, right, at the start method. Now, there are different ways to skin this cat, right? So, I don't know how well this diagram show here, and also courtesy I referenced our very well another Flownatic friend Andy Hedding's blog here. There's a link to it. But the idea here is when you want to use scheduled flows, you want to understand how they affect the governor limits. There are two approaches to do it, right? One is specifying the record scope in the flow start method. So when you define a schedule flow, you can define a start method, and there you can mention the conditions, and there you can specify an object and define the filter, what records you want to query. Say if I want to query all the opportunities created today, and I say I want to close them out if they're not moved to a particular stage. So your object will be opportunity, you will have a filter criteria with stage, and then you may have an action to update the opportunity, right? So this path, as you could see here, would consume for every record that's being queried, it adds to this 250K limit, okay? Or whatever the limit, licenses multiplied by 200, right? Whichever is greater. But what is more important thing you have to understand is how the platform works behind the scene is, since this is running in large data volume scenario, so it chunks the number of records you being queried. Say there are 10,000 opportunities that are being queried. Okay, it's chunked into batches of 200 records. So we're talking about like 50 batches. Okay, and 50 batches of flow interviews will be running in parallel, in concurrency, to complete this job. Okay, and while this could be a perfect example for some use cases where you have an object that you're querying and you're updating, and you don't expect much automation to run behind the scene when the update happens, meaning you don't have other flows or you don't have Apex triggers or validations that's running, pretty lightweight object, probably could be a very good choice. But what you need to keep in mind is, like, if you're going to run this, take this approach and implement this on an object that's heavily customized with a lot of automations already behind the scene, because these flows interviews are going to run in parallel, you can easily run into deadlocks, right? Because you may have an opportunity that's linked to a account record. When you update the opportunity, it will log the master, which is the account. There could be another batch, which we also could have this, opportunity for the same different opportunity for the same account record, right? So those will get into deadlocks or roll lock errors. So that's where, again, I don't, this may not apply to all the situations for all the customers, but there could be situations where you are working on a complex org and your customer has a lot of automation, or they have a lot of records in the objects. And this is where you have to make this, decision on which approach you want to take. So that's the one on the left side. And we'll quickly review on the one on the right side and maybe pause for any questions, right? This could go like very interesting conversation. So the right side one is, you don't set anything in the start method, right? You're just scheduling the job to run at a particular point in time or at a frequency, right? Now you're using a get records method, in this case, get opportunities, to query the opportunities that you want to update. So the caveat or the limit that you need to be aware with the right approach compared to the left one is, on the left one, you can query how much of a record you want, like 250K or whichever is higher, your license is multiplied by 200. But in the right approach, you are assuming that your object or that you're going to query for this particular day, for this job, is going to only query less than 50,000 records. Like this flow will only query less than 50,000 records. Otherwise, because the get records has a governor limitation on, like, how many records can be retrieved by Sockle, like, which is 50K. And also how many records can be updated, also matters here. Like you can still only update 10K records in per transaction, right? So you need to keep that into consideration. Like how big is your data volume going to be for the flow to be processing, can help you make you decide which option you want to go, the left one or the right one. Again, there's no right or wrong. So it actually depends on your use case and your org's complexity and the data volume. Okay. So I know it's a long, I was talking rambling for a while, but any feedback, any questions, any thoughts on this one? Or Paul, if you want to add anything. Oh, are you guys with me? I think
the video and the internet is lagging a little bit. Sorry, and I'm not as quick on the trigger to come back and to speak. So yeah, I think we're all absorbing. Anybody have any questions on what he's come up with, what he's presented so far? Are we all good? Yeah, how quickly things can spin out of control is an important thing to understand with flows. That is a developer, you usually have the feedback of seeing the system crash. When you're developing on local console stuff or on your own PC locally inside of an IDE. With flows, you're running on a distributed server and you don't necessarily see what kind of impact you're having. So it's really good you kind of need to go in, you need to be an architect before you start into flows, because it's not going to show you everything that you're doing wrong and everything that you're breaking as long as you use the right syntax. You drag and drop stuff, you can create a loop that runs out of control. My pattern is designed to possibly run out of control and kill the system. I've only broken one org by creating an infinite loop. And it was a little scary watching somebody's whole org go down because of some test code that they put out there using a flow that had like 10 steps. Salesforce automatically saw the issue, killed the process, and the org came right back up. But like I said, with flows, you don't actually get that. So you should know, hey, if I'm trying to do advanced things like looping, I need to know what impact that has. I need to understand some of the scope stuff here. And the explosion there is, the possibility to explode is nice to have in the back of your mind, and make sure you're asking those questions and trying to figure out performance, because it is not completely foolproof. It's good, but it is not foolproof. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, question? And you'll have to speak up and or come to the microphone. Sorry.
Yeah, just I'm asking like how we have limits, right? To query the limit and find crossing the limit, we try to gracefully exit it.
Oh, okay.
So can we do that in this flow what he showed?
That is a great question. So Arun, his question was, we have the ability when we're writing Apex to query and figure out where we are on some of the limits. I haven't seen any of that in Salesforce. I guess could you write an invocable Apex that could figure out where that flow is, and would it understand the context of the flow and not just the Apex invocation? Are there tools to be able to see that within flows yet?
That's a great question. So I was thinking along the same lines as you, Paul. We can have a reusable Apex, invocable Apex that uses the limit method to get the current context on how many records are being queried or retrieved, and the flow can consume it. But I haven't tried using it myself. It's a great, I think, something I probably will try it out.
It's like, that's a great, I want to write that code. Let's through this meeting, I want to go figure out how to write that. See where an invocable Apex sees the memory as it's being called by a flow, where that handoff is. Because I know the transaction's kind of maintained, but I don't, which enforces those governor limits, but I don't know if it'd be able to inspect up to the calling code and understand those limits there. That's a really interesting question. Cool.
Yeah, technically the limits API or method Apex classes we have would return us, like the limits from the server, regardless of the mechanism, like, who consumed this, right? Like Apex versus flows. Theoretically it should work, but yeah, certainly I'm going to try it out, but great question.
Yeah. The only way I've done it, I've controlled loops, and I create a loop counter inside of my loop so that I know how many times, and I usually, you can get 50,000 records, but that may be way too much to write in one batch. So if I get more than 5, I need to quit because there's too many SOCL queries, because a trigger is invoked, and that trigger has 3, and inside doing it 5 times in my loop, brings it up there. I've had to rewrite batches of things because the trigger does more stuff than I'm doing, and you get caught with those governor limits. So I kind of iterate each flow and make sure, okay, is 5 is too many, I break out at 5. But I can't find out whether I need to break out. I write a tuning thing, and I always externalize it. I make a label that says the max number of loops is 50 for this flow. And if it starts breaking at 50, You just go change the label and set it to 40 so that the flow respects that new lower and lower limit and can run within it. But it's a very much a break fix pattern. It's not predictive and adaptable to make sure you're not doing that. But interesting pattern.
Sure. There's one quick question from Ankita on the chat. Are there tools to measure flow performance? So my 2 cents. One is like we talked about. I mean, like, so there is no one holistic tool that you can just go and see, like, how where all your. I wish we have a tool that right now will break down the performance of different components within the flow or different elements within the flow and break it out outside of debug logs. So debug logs are still great. So when you want to troubleshoot how much your flow, how much time your flow takes, where does it eat most of the time, you can still set the debug logs to a finer mode for workflow automation, and that should all show up in, yeah, all the elements should show up in the debug log. But specifically, like for query performance, we can still use query plan. Whatever criteria you use on the get records, you can frame a SOQL query with the same criteria and then run that using the dev console query plan tool. And that's something like, actually will work great, for flows as well. Inherently, I don't know how many of you read through the Spring 24 release notes. The platform itself gave a boost to the performance. You don't have to turn on anything, but there's a performance boost that has been affected on the flows side of things as part of Spring 24 release. So yeah, I hope that helps, Ankita.
Yeah, great question.
Yep. This one, I don't know how many times, how many people will are affected by this. Again, one thing I would like to clarify is it could be the terminology could be confusing to some folks. It was confusing to me some time back. Like we have scheduled triggered flows, which are basically like it's a auto launch flow that runs at a particular period of time in a day, or it can be a series, recurring series. We also have something called scheduled actions, right? So basically, like you can have a record triggered flow, a flow that runs on an object, but then you want to perform some action like creating a task based on a change to the record, right? So you schedule that action. So there is a limit on how many um, flows can be scheduled, right? How many actions you can schedule? It's like 50,000 is the default limit. And you so it's an automated limit across the flow interviews. So this is where this is different than the scheduled flow trigger limit. And again, like with any other governance limits on the ecosystem, we got to be cognizant of this when we try to especially when you want to migrate all your workflow automation to flows, because with workflows we used to have an even higher limit on how many scheduled workflow actions we can do. But with flows, it's only 50,000 across the org. Okay. And this is, one thing I missed in the previous point is, I know we talked a lot about how scheduled trigger flow is batching up records and chunking out records and running threads in parallel. So now that you don't have to worry about the number of elements issue limit being reached error anymore with the recent upgrade, but you still need to be cognizant of the CPU timeout and the concurrent Apex errors, right? So CPU timeout is a big thing because right now, like when your flow runs, asynchronous, I mean, if your flow runs either as a screen flow or even like a scheduled trigger flow or a record trigger flow, you have a CPU timeout of 10 seconds. Okay. Your thread should complete within 10 seconds, right? And if not, you will going to get an error and the flow will abrupt, right? And the most common causes of some of these timeout issues is actually like if you're having a DML on the flow. So one is like if you're doing get records, make sure your query is well fine-tuned using the query plan tool or whatnot. And obviously, if you're doing a lot of iterations within the flow, like using loops, so make sure it's efficient. But the bigger culprit would be like if you're having a DML, say in our example, if you want to update opportunities, right? And if you're updating opportunities in bulk. So, and say if opportunity object as a trigger and maybe even has some flows, right? And those triggers could could update some other object whose triggers could fire, right? So that chain of events consume a lot of CPU time, and that's where the majority of the CPU timeout issues most often happen in the implementations. So we need to be cognizant of that. But good news is, um, like scheduled trigger flows, even though they are run, behind the scene, like at a particular point in time, they still run with synchronous limits. Like synchronous limits means you can only the CPU limit for synchronous transactions is 10 seconds. However, for asynchronous, it's 60 seconds. Okay, 6 times more than that. So there is a known issue, and there's a link. It's publicly available where we are recognized that scheduled flows are running in synchronous limits, but it could run in async limit, and the platform team and product teams are looking into it. But if that issue is resolved, then you could kind of have some breathing space with scheduled trigger flows where you don't have to worry too much about like the timeout issues. Like 60 seconds is way more than 10 seconds in that context.
So this is one where the event pattern actually could kind of work better than the current implementation until they fix this bug. So it's and I'm forgetting to talk on the microphone. It's interesting. This is a level of depth of flows calling something else, and that thing hitting a different limit as opposed to the one that's out there. So just had to get that jab in since you're making all of my innovations useless by with scheduled flows. Now, I have a question. I don't, if it's not appropriate, we can put it off for later. But I get asked, and I do not know how to answer this. I do bulkification out of habit. So whenever I'm doing an operation, if I'm doing a loop, I don't put a query to update something inside of the loop. I build up a collection, and at the end of the loop, I insert the collection. But everybody that I try and teach that says, well, no, flows are automatically bulkified behind the scenes. You don't have to use that bulk insert pattern, of which I say, witchcraft. That's not true. You have to do that. The bulkification happens in kind of a different way. Do you have any extra detail on that so that I can scare people away from that bad pattern of writing inserts in a loop?
No, yeah, even you're spot on. I don't know where people picked it. So maybe what could be confusing is, say like when I was talking about scheduled triggered flows and how when they want to perform a large object, right? Like say thousands of records, and the platform, inherently as a way to like chunk those and process in parallel. So I don't know if people are mixing up that with, oh, everything in flow is bulkified, but you are spot on. And it's actually in one of those, I mean, I should have called it here, but I thought it's actually well published by Salesforce. It's in that Salesforce published article, and where it clearly says you cannot have DMLs and and sockle queries inside your loops. Like how you follow for Apex, same rules apply here. Because yeah, like you would be iterating through like say 100 records, right? And then you are done. Say you have sockles for each in the iteration, and you're blowing up the sockle limits. Um, so for sure, yeah, like it's not inherently bulkified in that way. Especially if you're having DMLs and like queries within in your loops.
I took that class, the boot camp on Flow at Dreamforce, and that's what they were saying, is to build a collection and do all your changes and update the collection, and then at the end, write your last statement.
And then what am I missing here? When they make the statement that flows is bulkified, what are they referring to?
I think if I understand correctly, and I only barely understand, so Arun, you'll have to weigh in, that flows are bulkified when multiple interviews are run simultaneously, that all of those, if 300 steps run for an object or whatever for it at the same time, and it's got one insert statement at the end, that those multiple inserts are batched and put into one thing, but not if you're doing it stepwise within the flow. That's my guess from the various anecdotes. So if you can clarify, otherwise I am against, don't know.
No, I mean, so let's take this one on the right side, right? This opportunity loop flow, right? So let's say this is a record triggered flow. So I'm updating 1,000 opportunities. Okay. Now, the way those opportunities are being split into batches and run in parallel, right, in concurrency, that is what when we say bulkified, that's what it means actually. The platform takes care of it, like chunking out and executing those operations in parallel. Um, but if you look at the how this flow is structured, now you are getting the opportunities and then you are iterating through the opportunity, right? Here, in this for each loop, if you're introducing a DML or a socle, it's going against an anti-pattern because you are going to now like query, for each record that's being iterated, you're going to issue a socle or consume a socle and say like we are going to blow up the governor limits because all these are applied for a transaction and this all runs still in a transaction and you will simply easily consume the 1,000 or 100 socle limits. So bulkification applies, like if yeah, like how the platform inherently processes large records by checking it out and running in parallel, right? But within the flow, if you're trying to add DMLs and socket queries, especially within iterations, that won't be bulkified. Like you still run into platform limits.
Gotcha. Yeah, somebody said that flows are bulkified automatically, and everybody has used that as an excuse to not write bulkified patterns inside of flows, and so we just have to keep dispelling that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, that was a good one that had been itching me for a while.
No, that's a great one. And I'll see, like, we can follow up with if there's any white paper or anything. If I find on that, I'll share to clarify that. But that's thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, it's a good thing to clarify. So yeah, I mean, like I'll address this triggers and that multiple so now we can talk about the question that was asked at the beginning, right? At Satya probably. Like how about what is the best practice on the number of flows per object, right? Like Paul was saying, no golden rule, but it's like how we are recommended for triggers. It's recommended that you have one flow per object, and then like you can have subflows that can be like called from the master flow. We have seen customers using that pattern, but the for depending on the implementation, and especially if you already have a org that has Apex triggers written and you're not planning to refactor those, but say some customers have left the triggers as is and any new automation they want to build with flows, right? So if you're taking that kind of approach, then I think the best solution is settle on a framework that can help them coexist. Like, a framework that can support maintaining the transaction integrity between flows and Apex trigger. So why I say that is I would like to show this diagram, right? So I mean, probably you might have seen, so since we still have workflows and process builders, running in the system, it's not fully retired. Like any updates, inserts we make on the into the object, right, goes through this like multiple hops. Like like you run through validation rules. Then if you have before flows, those get executed. Then before triggers get executed, and then any duplication rules like on account or lead object, those get executed. And then you have after triggers, assignment rules, workflows, the whole 9 years, right? So, and here, like now, if you're going to have an implementation that has triggers, Apex triggers, that's firing when a record is inserted, and you also have flows that are firing when a record is inserted. So there's a good chance that you are like, unnecessarily like iterating those, running through these iterations unnecessarily multiple times. And also, it's possible that you're not able to control which one you want to run first, right? Because maybe I want my Apex logic to run first and then the flow, or maybe I want the flow to do something first and then let the Apex trigger run, right? So the answer to all this is like, I mean, at this point, like we recommend customers choosing a trigger framework, and there are some trigger frameworks available already, or if you're building your own for your customer, accommodate flows in the trigger framework because the framework the ones that are using custom metadata driven, they can be configured to have flows, part of that, the entire orchestration. Uh, so that even any recursions you want to prevent, right? Say you are updating an opportunity that is updating an account record, and you don't want the opportunity to be updated again, right? So those recursions and all, you can nicely um, use the frameworks today mostly support it for triggers, but the same can be extended to flows. And so, yeah, I mean, if you don't want to run into this scary issues with, order of execution not being managed, nor having, long running transactions, because we have all this multiple things being executed multiple times for a given transaction, it's better to use a framework that can support coexistence with flows and triggers. Or even best, if your implementation is simple and if you want to get rid of all triggers, migrate to flows, and you can have one flow, master flow, and then have subflows that can manage this, manage the orchestration. Does that make sense? Again, there's no formal guidance from Salesforce or the product team yet, right? So it's again based on the customer's implementation, because some customers are in the transformation phase where they are moving from trigger to flows. Some are actually learning to coexist. So that's where I think depending on your implementation, you should choose a path. But my preference or my recommendation is consider the scalability. You will never know when you want to write Apex code. So better to choose a framework that supports both. And there are some already available. Yeah, so I think Varuna says which framework support both. So there's one it's publicly available. Mitch Spano's framework supports. Mitch Spano is a Google from Google. Um, I mean, so he has a framework that actually supports flows and Apex, and you can check that out. And there is a couple more actually like that.
And we have a question. Did you see the question? I couldn't hear if you answered that or not, but Varuna said, asked which Apex trigger frameworks include flows.
Yeah, I just
yep. Go ahead.
I just answered that. Yeah, it's Mitch Spano's framework. Mitch Spano is the guy from Google. He's a Salesforce trailblazer. So I mean, his framework's pretty good. That currently supports. It's a metadata-driven framework that supports both flows and Apex. And there's one more framework I came across. I don't remember. I can share later. So there are frameworks available that supports coexistence of both.
So Arun, as a tangent, Patrick Fent at Salesforce wrote one of the most mature trigger handler frameworks I've seen. I can't say where I saw it or how I saw it, but fortunately I can talk about it because it was made by Salesforce, and I'm hoping that he eventually, or you guys eventually, open source it. But I think you can go get it since it was created by Salesforce directly. It was not as a work product of a project. But his framework was really, really good. Handled error logging. It even pulled some event stuff into it, some security logging. I didn't see anything that had to do with flows, but the last time we worked on it, it would have been easily extensible to include flow orchestration within it. So
nice.
You might ping him and see. I'd be interested to see where that is now.
Sure. Yeah, that can be a takeaway. So this is something I would like to quickly touch base again. So this is decision guides, right? I mean, you might have seen this our article from the architect Salesforce.com site, where you have a pretty long decision guide on trigger automation, which tools to use, and it also applies for screens as well. When to use a screen flow versus when do you want to use a LWC, versus a combination of screen flow and LWC. So that, there's a good automation article on the trigger automation, right? So, but what I mean, I find helping most customers is, with these two tools right now, let's take away workflow rules and process builders, they're going to go away. With flows and triggers, which is here to stay, right? How do you decide, when to use which which tool, right? And again, this is not meant to say like, not meant to confuse people, don't, go code or, go flow, depending on your organization setup, because like complex organizations will have a lot of batch processing that may be better supported via Apex in terms of scalability. But there could be some simple orchestrations, even for the complex organizations, that are very well orchestrated via flows. So it's what I have is an illustration, but like something like this, right? Like say, for example, your flow is invoked for batch processing. You're processing a bulk, lot of records. It's a record-threaded flow. You're talking about millions of records, nightly job. And so if you want to do a fast field update, um, you're checking whether it's for, first of all, it's for bulk processing or not. If it's yes, does it involve a complex logic or formula, within the flow, right? If yes, then, you take a cognizant decision, like, okay, is it better suited to be done in Apex, considering that, like, formulas, like take a lot of time to be executed in flows, or is it not so complex enough to kill the performance, and can we go with the flow, right? That is as an architect, as a tech lead, you make that, kind of decision, and then choose a tool, right? But if it's a fast field update, right, meaning like almost like a before insert, before update trigger, you're changing a variable or a field on the fly when the record is created or inserted, right? So that's something is less performance intensive, no brainer. It could be done in a before save flow. So my recommendation here is like come up with a decision matrix that is uh, could be unique to your organization needs. And you can use the parent guide from Salesforce as a reference to come up with your decision matrix. But yeah, always have one that could fit your needs. Yeah, anything, I don't know, Paul, anything you would like to add on the
Yeah, no, I
decision
have a
guides?
question on that. So I think fast field update is old Salesforce ease.
Yeah, that's
Salesforce
right.
speak. I don't think that's a common term anymore, because I had to, looking at early flows, I see
Yeah.
those fast field updates referenced, but I don't think that's in the nomenclature anymore. Can you talk about that? Or
Yeah, that you're right, actually. I mean, this picture is a little older. But yeah, fast field updates was like it was like there in 2022, and then I think as per the recent enhancement to record trigger flow, yeah, we don't use that nomenclature anymore. But it's almost like you are using it's a before save flow where you are trying to set value of field without having to do a DML. As simple as that, right? No DML involved, but you're changing the value for a field on an object. Almost like if you're familiar with Apex triggers, anything you write in the before insert or before update trigger doesn't involve DML, but it can change the value for the object. So same concept. That's what I meant here.
I like the decision matrix, and we were talking a little bit about this earlier, and the middle block there, does an apex trigger already exist on the object and the complex logic or formula? So I proposed, and it may be a hot take and people may punch at me for it, but trying to figure out if an entire feature can be written in either flows, or if you have to do so much of the feature in Apex that you should abandon flows and not have split logic between two technologies. I use like an 80-20 rule. If I can do it with 80%, like the vast majority of it in flows, write it all in flows and a couple of invocable Apexes. If it's 60-40, then don't use flows, write it all in Apex to have the logic as much as possible. Even though you could do some of it in low code, having two different codes is worse than having some low code and some non-low code mixed and not be able to troubleshoot it very well. Some other mitigating patterns, if you had well-organized Apex, maybe you could get away with more of it. But for most of the implementation maturity that I've seen, you kind of want to pick one or the other. So agree, disagree?
I mean, totally, because I mean, like, again, it goes back to this diagram, right? I mean, like if you have one automation tool, it's much easier to control what happens and control the order of execution, less overlap between the tools per se. Yeah, I'm with you. Try to stick to one tool as much as possible, but there could be one certain nuances where you are in a very big organization that already invested a lot of code on Apex, and they're not willing to convert them to flows or for whatever appropriate reasons. In that case is when probably you make the judgmental decision. Okay, now I'm going to write a flow, but you already have a trigger sitting there. And if it's going to be complex enough in a flow, should we just add to the trigger? So that's the kind of decision making, as tech leads and architects, we plan ahead actually.
Another question. It's regarding record locking. When we're writing Apex and we're working with a batch of records, Salesforce has a tendency of locking the parent record. And sometimes when you're updating the child record, not locking, when you're writing the child record and you're writing that in bulk, get these errors on unable to gain a lock on the parent record. And I've always known this problem when we're writing Apex code. Do we know if the way in which Salesforce does bulk updates for flow, has anybody encountered that problem? If they corrected it, it seems to me a really stupid thing to do, to lock the parent record when you're writing child record. But Salesforce has never fixed that in Apex. I'm wondering if it's fixed in flows.
So Arun, could you hear the question at all?
Yeah, I heard it. I heard it.
Oh, okay, great. That's impressive. Nice. Okay, great. I won't try and transfer that. Flow has some asynchronous tooling that might not be subject to the same type of synchronous locking that Apex does. So,
yeah. Oh, sorry. You were going to say something, or
what's that?
Oh no. Okay, no. You want my perspective, right? So, I mean, I mean, it's a very valid point, Moise, that you brought up, right? So that is regardless of the tool, it's a platform level issue, right? So whether you use Apex or whether you use flows or whether we use even bulk APIs or REST APIs. So if you're updating whatever means the means may be, when we update the child, the parent gets locked. But I think with Apex, you were able to build some good retry mechanisms to overcome those. And this is where I liked Paul's the event-driven architecture, where for stuff like this, so in flows, you were not able to update a record because of row lock issues. But if you try the same update after a few seconds, it's going to go through because the lock will be released by the other transaction. So here's where decoupling the transaction using platform events, one of the approach that Paul had put together, could actually creatively solve for this issue, I feel like. I mean, okay. Otherwise, the platform still respects row lock. I mean, from flows, you still will get into row locks, especially in the scheduled flows, where, like I said, things are going to run in parallel. If you configure the start element to have the criteria where the parallel batches are being run, and you're not ordering the records, right? So you can have opportunities tied to the same account in two different batches. So you can very easily run into those row lock. But it's still a limitation, but there are the creative ways, like Paul's solution is what I would defer to work around those, track those errors that are failed due to row lock, retry with an event-driven mechanism.
As a database guy, I've never fully understood the concept of locking the parent record. Have you ever been able to figure out why they do that?
it's a database constraint per se. I mean, if I find anything more technical that's can be shared, I'll happy to follow up. Um, but yeah, you're right. I mean, like especially it comes with the parent-child relationship, and sometimes some objects we don't even think that they have a master child, but there is some implicit relationship as well. Even there, like this role locking happens, and in my experience, I always have these issues when processing with bulk API using like Informatica or other tools. Um, and what saved us is having a very good retry mechanism for all those failed records to reprocess them. Um,
Yeah, okay, thank you, sir.
Sure thing. Yeah. Oh, that's all I had, Paul. Anything else on from me? Any other questions?
That's great. We're right on time, so we may finish up here. I think we've got enough time for a couple of questions, and then Sarah has 2 copies of her book to give away. If you'd like to be considered for receiving one of those, if you'll raise your hand. This is her book about running startups, charity stand-ups, which I think the kind of preparation and the cat herding that goes on is probably great for all manner of projects. And Lawrence, you were here first. You were here early today, so you have my preference. Who else wanted to be in the raffle? Okay, a couple of people. All right, well, give me a second. So, anybody have any questions for Arun?
Yeah. So, the screen first, right? After LWC, also there's an honest gap for the so it is kind of a decision guide for it to use the screen first or some script, the use cases for the honest script process, the screen first.
And I'm sorry, when I come closer, you have to go louder too. That's only script. Yeah. Yeah, what's happening with the bake-off between OmniScripts and flows? I know they're both supposed to be available on the platform. That's a fantastic flow question because there's now 2 flow tools in core Salesforce. In theory, I think that went into GA a couple of months ago. What do you have on that for us, Arun?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I was thinking to touch base on that a bit today, but I didn't know like the audience here, like how much familiar they are with OmniScript. So there is again a decision matrix, like how we showed for Apex versus flows. Nothing like coming from Salesforce, but like something like we have put together, which we can be shared. But at a high level, right? OmniScripts, just to be clear, it's not available for all the orgs, right? Like it's coming as part of industries. Like if you have a FSC or a health cloud, it's bundled as part of that. Like it's called flows for industries. That's how that's a new brand name, recent brand name. And so say if you have a org that also has OmniScripts licensed, right? Like FSC or health cloud. The compelling reason to go for OmniScript is the rich user interface. Screen flows is evolving, right? I mean, they are way better than what they were like, say, a year or 2 ago, and they keep evolving. But when you want a very rich user interface, like say a good use case could be an onboarding application, right? You're creating a customer onboarding application on the platform. With screen flows, you would run into some limitations, and you would end up creating LWCs that sit on the screen flow. But if you take OmniScripts, without writing code for LWC, you would be able to configure a rich UI that can support a very elite onboarding flow per se, right? So user interface, having a need for a rich user interface without having to write code is really like could be a decider for OmniScripts overflows when you're in industries. But as far as integrations is concerned, that gap is getting reduced because earlier OmniScripts, as you know, like they have integration procedures using which you can, without writing code again, you can connect to in other systems using APIs. behind the scene. But with flows, as you may be aware, in the last few releases, flows for we have HTTP post and HTTP get available, generally available on flows. And like you also have external services. So the graph integrations is getting narrowed. But again, in terms of the user interface, OmniScript's way far ahead actually. So again, yeah, I mean there is better decision metrics that I can probably share with the group through Paul to consider between these two tools actually. But at a high level, this is what I can think of.
Yeah, the guidance that I've heard is if you want pixel perfect, OmniScripts it has a slight edge over being able to bake LWCs into flows as Lightning components. And then I've heard that the data wrappers, the data service for getting to remote data is much stronger in OmniScripts than it is in flows yet. So that would be, I think that's my only two distinctions I think that I've heard. All right, any other questions for Arun? Okay. Oh, yep.
Anything you want to share about like the Einstein copilots and creating flows or getting some AI assistance with flows?
Did you hear that, Arun?
Einstein I didn't hear that properly. What is that?
Yeah, basically, anything you want to share with us with regards to just kind of Einstein AI assisted creation of flows.
Oh,
yeah.
No,
those aren't easy enough. You need AI to do it.
Or is it currently still just kind of more of a hype than reality? Like just kind of should we temper our expectations or?
And fair warning, Arun, I'm recording this and it's supposed to go on YouTube, so don't give any answers that you aren't allowed to.
I don't have any answers. I don't have any because I'm not following. I'm not very close to that sort of things. I mean, I know I saw on the release notes only for Spring, like there's something with prompt builder being available to be embedded in the flows and whatnot. But as far as like auto creation of flows, I'm not privy to that. I don't know what's happening.
Fair enough. Yeah, thanks.
Fair enough.
Great. All right. Thanks, Arun. I think we're going to finish up here with picking the winner of the book. I know you've got family to get back to. Thank you so much. This was a fun conversation. I think this is the most hybrid presentation we've had yet. And except for me forgetting the microphones, I think it went really well. So I'm glad everybody's here. Everybody got access to Arun. We got to pick your brain and dissect flows a bit. Thanks so much, Arun.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And thanks. Nice meeting you all virtually. Thanks for having me here.
All right, thanks a lot. And we probably won't have a virtual session next time. Next month will be in person only. I'm not going to try and take a GoPro to the tower and figure out how to make that work, but we'll see everybody online in March. All right, thanks a lot.